In the United States, men committed roughly 80% of all suicides in 2021. This is data that was compiled by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's National Center for Health Statistics. Some may gaslight the situation by saying that men today are soft, but before you judge, I think it's worth looking into why things have gotten this far. These 2021 numbers from Priory Group provide some insight. 77% of men polled have suffered with common mental health symptoms like anxiety, stress, or depression. 40% of men have never spoken to anyone about their mental health. 29% of those who haven't done so say they are too embarrassed to speak about it, while 20% say there is a negative stigma on the issue. The biggest cause of mental health issues in men's lives are work, 32%, their finances, 31%, and their health, 23%. 40% of men polled said it would take thoughts of suicide or self-harm to compel them to seek professional help. For many men, it seems at that point it's too late. There's a silent internal battle that so many of us are facing every day. It's tough to combat the dark thoughts and emotions and communicate under control. I'm sure you've heard the saying, hurt people hurt people. It's hard to refute it. A vast number of men out there, including me, have been afflicted by our childhood and other experiences as we've grown into manhood. As a result, we've afflicted others with words and actions we don't even understand most times. And it will continue to happen if we don't equip ourselves with the tools we need to push for the changes that create better mental and emotional stability. By publishing Battle Cry, Jason Wilson has called men to align with their higher selves. He takes time to provide the steps that will allow us to embrace our emotions rather than be ruled by them, win internal battles before they become external wars, break free from misconstrued masculinity and embrace our humanity, communicate more effectively with the people in our lives, and heal trauma from our past in order to live our fullest lives in the present. If you're a man who has that burning desire to win that war from within, stay tuned. 1. Escaping emotional incarceration. Quote, "My emotions only become my enemy when I suppress them within my inner me." End quote. Sharath Wilson. The physical prison isn't the only cage that holds men captive. There are mental, spiritual, and emotional prisons too. The difference is these holding cells are only inhabited by men who choose to subject themselves to them, and only they can get themselves out. A lot of men have fought long and hard to be seen and heard. After a while, you get so used to being tuned out that you start to tune yourself out. It's a defense mechanism that prevents you from continuously hurting yourself and hurting others, which is typically the byproduct of hoarding emotions. This intentional numbing has the power to totally detach a man from his emotions, hindering his ability to identify when he's done something right or when he's done something wrong. Because of the shortage of safe spaces for men to openly express our non-masculine emotions, we choose to lock our feelings away and toss the key. It saves us from being judged, humiliated, or agitated just for being a flawed human being just like everyone else. The truth is, this causes us to turn around and judge ourselves, alienate ourselves from people, and it stimulates a level of resentment that breeds irrational behavior. If we wish to free ourselves from the bondage with our suffering, we have to challenge the thought patterns that aren't serving us and the natural emotional responses that stem from the survival mentality. Emotional intimacy and vulnerability might appear to be a threat when our brains are locked in this physiological state, leading to conflict in our relationships and living a life that's dictated by fear. There are multiple instances over time that brings things to this point. A lot of these situations have led to unresolved trauma. Maybe you couldn't get with that pretty girl at school because you weren't tough enough, or you didn't come to school in the latest drip every day. Maybe you took on a persona that really wasn't true to you, or you aligned yourself with danger just to get her to notice you. Maybe your father was physically or emotionally absent. Maybe your father was insensitive because his father was insensitive, and he continued the pattern unknowingly. Maybe you lost someone who was dear to you. The fact of the matter is, life is going to be painful and discouraging sometimes. That's just a part of living in this imperfect world. But if we don't find a way to express our feelings, they eventually build up until we feel buried, overburdened, and bitter. To stop projecting his mental suffering and trauma onto others, a man must first face himself. This is one of the toughest tasks for a man to accomplish because it's easier to avoid his problems or to blame others if he does address them. A man is typically the head of the household, but if he's wounded by his pain and trauma while playing this role, everyone else in the home can be traumatized too. Crying is a healthy way to release pain, and care, compassion, and empathy, especially in partnerships, doesn't make you soft. These are positive human qualities. Regardless if these characteristics seem feminine, a man has to learn how to find balance with the feminine energy that is embedded in all men, and is vice versa for women. Dr. William H. Frey, a biochemist, discovered that in addition to water, tears generated by emotion also release stress hormones from our bodies. His research also found that those who suffer from stress-related disorders cry less than those who are seen as healthy. When can men comfortably release their emotions and stress? Jason Wilson suggests therapy. Therapy allows you to communicate with a professional without being judged. You can learn how to articulate how you feel, and you can learn how to exercise the vulnerability that encourages others to be vulnerable. A man who can protect himself and his loved ones physically and can conquer his emotions is the most dangerous man. 2. Misconstrued masculinity. Quote, "The brave is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." End quote. Nelson Mandela. Men berate one another for seeming scared and consistently urge one another to remain strong. This subconsciously communicates to other men that something is wrong when we acknowledge that we're tired or weakened. Contrary to popular belief, acknowledging weakness can lead a man down the path to gaining power. Identifying your vulnerabilities enables you to comprehend how to strategically overcome them. In situations like the ones just mentioned, we seem to be reminding one another to maintain the macho persona that has been advertised to us. But men are far more complex than that. The relentlessly promoted mainstream narrative sends men on this never-ending quest to achieve a false idea of perfection. If you're pressured into striving to be the general public's idea of what a real man is, you can set yourself up to be emotionally imbalanced. Like I mentioned before, men and women both possess masculine and feminine energy, and it's up to both parties to balance both faculties. So many of the men in our communities die because they chose to stroke their ego instead of exercising rationality. They really just didn't want to be called a you-know-what. The male population might make decisions that would help them live richer, longer lives if they were encouraged to experience fear rather than being compelled to adhere to the masculine mandate, a societal bylaw that forces men to solely focus on being aggressive. Being brave isn't the act of recklessly throwing yourself into the line of fire. It refers to the act of taking a logical course of action as we experience the fear we may feel. In a world where hypermasculinity is often celebrated, it's brave to be compassionate, nurturing, and expressive. Challenge the status quo by indulging in unconventional activities. It's okay if you like to dance. It's okay if you like sports other than football and basketball. It's okay to prioritize self-care and intentionally work on your image. And it's okay to be attracted to nature. One of the most therapeutic and fun activities I've enjoyed in the past few years that I'm sure most people would consider feminine is hand embroidery. 3. Putting peace in perspective. Quote, "It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." End quote. Mark Twain. Our irrational responses to challenging situations is typically fueled by the misinformation that got us to believe that force can solve everything. But testy situations can be diffused when men take the time to collect themselves, connect with the infinite spirit, and sift through their emotions. That's a true test of willpower. Composure and silence brings favorable results too. Control is more intimidating than commotion. It's a misconception that peace is this heavenly utopian space we eventually arrive at the end of our lives. You can actually achieve heaven on earth. Peace is a balanced state of mind and state of being that is achieved by defiantly releasing negative thoughts and refocusing on the positive ones. Before you can live in any peace, you have to find peace within yourself. You might think that the infinite spirit is the one who grants you peace when you pray for it, but the infinite spirit is really a resource that allows you to cast your emotional burdens onto the Christ within and detach from the negative emotions. Then you can operate from a more positive standpoint with a freer mind and a lighter attitude. Ultimately, you consciously grant yourself peace. Learn more by checking out The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel Shinn. That's another book that we did a summary on. There's always going to be temptations and urges to go down a path that isn't aligned with our divinity. There's always that demon on one shoulder and the angel on the other. But we always have the option to take the high road and do what's righteous. The challenges that arise in life are not there to destroy us. They're there to promote our personal development and increase our internal strength. Without these challenges, we would blindly surrender to comfortability. Quote, when your perception of God is larger than your perception of the storm you're in, you can remain calm and even call good times to rise and come forth, end quote. Jimmy Davis Compton Jr. Exercise in faith allows us to relinquish control we crave to influence all outcomes. Some things are just not in our hands. The only thing we can willfully control is our thoughts and emotions. It's imperative that we take time to recalibrate and recuperate from the stress we might accumulate throughout the day. Here's where you would apply Jason Wilson's 4 R's: reflect, release, reset, and rest. Whether you do it through prayer, meditation, or journaling, he suggests that you start and end each day with self-reflection. Assess how you're feeling and what may have you feeling this way. If there are any negative thoughts or negative feelings that have been holding you back, this is an opportunity to cast those emotional burdens on the Christ within, like I mentioned previously. Allow your soul to relinquish these additional duties that you don't need to take on by yourself anymore. Once you're back in a space where you can enjoy the stillness of the present moment, you can rest peacefully. 4. Courageous transparency. Quote, if you don't put a mask on, you won't have to worry about it coming off. Paul Singleton. Deceptive statements like real men don't cry and what doesn't kill you will only make you stronger have led to the acceptance of this false idea that the suppression of emotions signifies a powerful demeanor. So many of us are so caught up in our career journeys, building that business, pleasing our woman, or tending to the kids to the point where we can't even find time to hang out with other decent, like-minded, substantial men so we can speak our mind. Some think it's homosexual to spend time with other men, but this is utter arrogance and ignorance. In a true judgment-free zone, sometimes all it takes is one man opening up about his struggles, and before you know it, you have the rest of the group expressing themselves too. A lot of us are dealing with or have dealt with similar challenges. I've sat in a car with friends for hours pouring my heart out. There have been countless instances where I've been on the phone with my friends for extended periods of time, detailing what I've been going through. I've cried in front of my friends on numerous occasions, and none of them ever made me feel weak for it. These moments allow me to be human and stimulate my healing process. There's going to be moments where you'll have to openly confront your brothers about the way that they have hurt you too. And if you feel you can't do that, maybe those really aren't your brothers. In the event that you do take a chance to speak your truth, you want to choose your words carefully. Confrontation doesn't have to lead to chaos. Instead of saying, you pissed me off, it may keep the peace and make reconciliation more likely to occur if you say, your words hurt me, brother. It's not always easy to find the words that vividly describe how you feel. The feeling wheel created by psychologist Robert Plutchik can help with that. First, examine the 6 words in the inner circle and choose the one that most accurately captures your emotions. Then, pause to evaluate which phrases from the second layer best describe how you're feeling right now. Finally, spend as much time as necessary studying the outer tier to identify the feeling that's actually the strongest. That's probably the one you need to express. Because men don't typically hone in on their communication skills, it contributes to us being dismissed and disregarded. Since the feeling wheel allows you to get to the root of why you're feeling the way you do, it increases your ability to articulate yourself without coming off like you're just complaining or whining. The goal is to respond when we're in the middle of a conversation, not react. If you're in a relationship and being authentic or transparent with your partner is still a constant battle after you intentionally implement strategies like this, there may be other matters that need to be addressed. Like David Dita mentions in The Way of the Superior Man, another book that we did a summary on, you don't want to be in a position where you're just tolerating your woman. You shouldn't allow heartbreak or the fact that your needs weren't met stop you from believing you're lovable. There's endless opportunity for you to find the one who you can love without limits. And you don't have to have it all together to get there. Money is a resourceful tool that will surely allow you to take care of yourself and your partner, but it doesn't dictate your worth. There are so many attributes to you as a valuable man that cannot be measured. The woman who really loves you will choose you daily and grow with you because of who you are, not because of what you can provide. Please don't misinterpret what I'm saying and totally abandon the idea that you need healthy cash flow in your life. Just understand that there's way more to life than that. Additionally, your partner is a good person to consult with when you're making decisions, especially if she seems to understand you. This level of transparency can help you both stay on the same page, but tread lightly with that. You don't want to abrasively or unintentionally cast your emotional burdens onto her. There may be times where you have to refer back to prayer, meditation, and journaling. Use your discernment. 5. Abort your shadow mission. Quote, in transition, God does not lead you out of certain seasons because they're bad. He leads you out of certain seasons because they're over. End quote. J. Conrad Huell. This has been a sensitive topic for me at times, but it's something I think is good for the soul once we're able to drop our defenses. A shadow mission is an unfulfilled desire or unmet objective that we persist in pursuing, even though it's harmful and prevents us from following the path that was ordained for us. I think a lot of us have had something that we were chasing at one point or another, and I'm not going to outright tell you to abort your mission like Jason Wilson does, but if your pursuit of a particular goal is stopping you from making progress in crucial areas of your life, I would like you to consider the fact that you may have to restructure your priorities a bit. Motivational speakers on social media might influence you to chase your dream until you catch it, but they're not on the journey with you. And this doesn't mean there isn't room to be creative and express yourself. It doesn't mean life has to be mundane and boring. Wilson just recommends you don't ignore your potential now while you're focusing on the potential you're imagining for the future. According to Jason, there are 3 characteristics that qualify a particular quest as a shadow mission. Character 1. It reflects our deepest aspirations, fantasies, talents, and abilities, but creates a spiritual struggle between who we want to be and who we're meant to be. Character 2. A shadow mission doesn't have to be fully against God's will. Getting married can be something that's in the cards for you, but you probably aren't supposed to form a union with the person you're continuously pursuing. The challenge is figuring out when something isn't God's will for you and understanding that the opportunity at the moment might not be the appropriate one. If you're consistently hurting yourself or others to produce a precise outcome, it may be time to let go. Characteristic 3. A shadow mission has the potential to remind you of past successes and entices you to engage in habits that make you feel like you're able to turn back time. Be cautious. Try not to neglect the present while you reminisce about the past. 6. Purging passivity. Quote, passivity may be the easy course, but it is hardly the honorable one. End quote. Noam Chomsky. There's a difference between aggression and assertiveness. It's not evil to be assertive. Assertive language doesn't disregard the needs of others. It's courteous, understandable, and still firm. This requires a man to pay close attention and show concern while listening to the other person. Anger is a powerful attitude that can entice us to jump to correct a mistake or take a stand against wrongdoing without having any intentions in mind. When you don't exercise consciousness, you can easily hurt yourself and others. Jason considers anger untamed power. Assertiveness is purposeful action. Since men don't know how or when to channel a calculated amount of strength or use their power righteously, they avoid taking any risks by choosing to stay silent. But this doesn't bring the type of peace they would expect. This type of stillness can actually make your life unbearable. If you're at the point in life where you find walking on eggshells is the best way for you to keep things calm, Eventually, you'll become so accustomed to it that you'll become mute, and that won't serve you or anyone you're interacting with. Men often use passivity to express humility, but the cup of frustration will overflow the more it's filled. When they're continuously disrespected, all the emotions that were internalized get projected back onto the wrong people at a later point. Humbleness helps a man stray from arrogance, but it doesn't mean that you have to allow others to take advantage of you, show you up, dismiss you, or disregard you. It's okay to acknowledge your dislike for something. You don't have to be a people pleaser. People pleasing is a commitment to inauthenticity. Besides, in a society where there seems to be an agenda to castrate men, you don't want to contribute to your own castration because you don't want to seem like a threat. One statement that gets taken out of context is, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. Yes, those who consistently choose the path of violence will likely suffer from it in due time, but it doesn't mean that you standing up for yourself or your family has to end in death. Faith and love are only theory until it's tested. There are times where dominance is necessary. 7. Combat communication. Quote, just as two wrongs don't make a right, rage against offenders is probably the worst way to try to correct them, end quote. Albert Ellis. Combat communication is the interpreted data that's downloaded during battle between two fighters. The fighter who is more attentive and assesses his opponent's strengths, weaknesses, and habits in real time will be armed with the knowledge necessary to counter his attacks and position himself in the best possible position to win. Similar to this, when we exercise control over our emotions and behave in a way that's not influenced by our fears or desired results, we're able to perceive each situation objectively. Instead of being defensive, we can mentally gather information from the other person's actions to help us solve problems. When two people in a relationship are wounded, they're more sensitive to their emotional triggers. There's so many instances where we hear things and jump to react because we're offended. Once our ego takes a hit, we swiftly resort to the measures that will patch it up, and we'll go for the jugular if we deem it necessary. How would things play out differently if we took the time to listen, analyze, and intentionally respond? Two people need to make a conscious decision to love each other righteously if they want the partnership to last long term. But Jason has found that when men instinctively sidestep verbal jabs from their partner to avoid the hurt they can cause, observe body language, acknowledges what she feels or what she may be trying to express, he's more likely to disarm her. Combat communication teaches you how to reply effectively, but also develops your capacity to consider a range of options before choosing one. It just takes an immense amount of discipline, and that comes with practice over time. When you're dealing with a testy situation, your mind is naturally wired to get into protection mode. That doesn't really set you up for success in these type of situations. It's imperative that we take a moment to breathe, calm the mind, and quiet the emotions before engaging decisively using compassion. 8. Sexual self-control. Quote, he who reigns within himself and rules passions, desires, and fears is more a king, end quote. John Milton, Paradise Regained. So many of us have grown up in an environment where it was considered normal to disrespect women, and the insecure, hypersexual men who we think are supposed to be our role models gives us the idea that women are just objects we use for our pleasure. Provocative social media content and other explicit content on the internet stimulates erotic fantasies in the minds of young men endlessly. They accumulate such a bloodthirsty desire for lustful interactions that they start to step outside and exuberate irrational behavior. When I was in middle school, there were dudes who would pull girls' pants down as they were heading up the stairs just because they were so eager to see what their bodies looked like underneath their garments. And these young ladies were caught so off guard that they couldn't even defend themselves. I always wondered how they felt on the inside afterwards. As a young man, I've made some cringy decisions myself. In the past, I've ruined my chances with women on many occasions while moving too fast, all because I couldn't control my urges and I was thinking about myself. A lot of us reach a point where we firmly hold on to this notion that women are meant to be seduced and deceived. We think that this is the ultimate form of masculinity. We're wrong. Women deserve to be loved. Before you hurry with your rebuttal, not all women, I would suggest you take some time to assess yourself and why you may be attracting the type of women you're used to dealing with. I know there's some women out there who are displaying very scornful behavior. You might think they're undeserving of affection, but they have unresolved trauma they have to work through as well. You don't have to stick around to endure the process with them if you don't think it's worth it. I'm not here to dictate what any man should do. But if you're still tempted to engage in promiscuous activities with these women, despite them blatantly showing you that they're wounded, I would suggest you don't manipulate them while they're weak. And Jason recommends we refrain from giving ourselves away to any woman we don't deem worthy of being our wife. These types of occurrences contribute to the cycle of trauma in our communities. The denial of temptations is a struggle that we will continue to face daily in a variety of ways. Discipline is a muscle that grows stronger with practice and patience. If you can avoid that junk food you know you shouldn't be eating, or subdue the urge to smoke, you can deny the buns too. The key is to mindfully stray away from the triggers that promote the act in the first place. The reality is, none of us will be able to truly love others and respect their boundaries until we truly love ourselves and respect our own boundaries. 9. Accepting affirmation. Quote, never allow the mistakes you've made stop you from being celebrated for the good that you've done. End quote. John Davis. When you're constantly worrying about your mistakes, entertaining the idea that they define you, and you've rarely received words of encouragement, it's typical for a man to face difficulty as he's learning how to acknowledge his own worth. When offered gestures of love, we get protective and resist being honored because sometimes it's hard to believe people in this world still love with pure intentions. It's like opening an umbrella and moving tactically to avoid the downpour of affection, but we gotta allow ourselves to be loved. Like Jason says, being neglected as a child and making mistakes as an adult does not mean you're not valuable. Self-doubt and self-criticism keep us from alignment with unconditional love, even the people who can help us heal our emotional wounds. You've ever saw your bro and said something like, "What's good, fly guy?" and he responded, "Nah, that's all you." That's just one small way we deflect affirmation. We've gone so long without it that we don't know how to accept it. We give it right back like a hot potato. Men need confidence to welcome love and give it too. For a man to restore his confidence, he has to address the experiences that have forced him to think less of himself. That can be done through therapy, open conversation with people you trust, journaling, or conversations with God. 10. Rest now or rest in peace. Quote, rest time is not waste time. It is economy to gather fresh strength. End quote. Charles Spurgeon. Rest is no longer viewed as a sign of strength, but rather a sign of weakness in today's grind culture and people-pleasing society. We're influenced to push ourselves until we run ourselves right into the ground. Then, as our health deteriorates, we recognize that our ruthless pursuit of success has done more harm than good. It's true that if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. At the same time, if he can't identify opportune time to rest, his work will kill him. A lot of great men have rushed to an early grave because they believe they're only as valuable as the amount of work they put in. Jason shares that after doing some research, he found that 61% of people who are still alive at age 80 are women. Additionally, women made up 82% of the population that made it to 100 years old in 2010. Most of us know deep down that the grind mindset is slowly destroying us, but we keep working when we should be relaxing, fighting when we should be seeking peace, and fretting when we should be praying, all because of the fear of failure. This is the formal definition of the word grind: to wear down by abrasion, to reduce to fine particles by crushing or pulverizing. People who claim to be grinding or to be on the grind frequently appear fatigued because their extensive labor is literally crushing them. We could combat this fatigue if we made an effort to take more naps, but it's concerning how many of us are reluctant to take naps out of concern that we'll look like an idler. You might have a greater issue to tackle if you think a daily power nap or a good night's rest will prevent you from taking care of your duties. I'm not saying you'll get a full 6 to 8 hours every single night. I'm just pointing out the fact that rest does have a positive impact on productivity. No form of work should put you in a position to lose your sanity, put your physical health in danger, or neglect your loved ones. Jason says, as long as we walk around like a superhero, people will keep asking us to do superhero things. Only you can stop it. In addition to resting, making time to engaging in recreational activities by yourself or with your friends could help you lighten up more. Go for a bike ride. Spend some time in the library. Check out a museum. There's so much to do. 11. Let go and live. Quote, time doesn't heal all pain. You need to learn how to let go. End quote. Roy T. Bennett, The Light in the Heart. We prevent ourselves from living the quality life we want to live when we mentally avoid those scars from the past and painful experiences rather than confronting them. And the more we ignore these unpleasant experiences and the feelings they create, the more we signal to our minds that we're threatened by them. When we stop running from our past, acknowledge it, and learn how to peacefully part ways with these instances, we're able to enjoy the present moment much more. Without this intentional process, our emotional damage can spill over into our relationships or onto our children. It's about forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't mean you're surrendering to the people who you feel did you dirty, justifying their actions, or totally pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness isn't something you trade in exchange for an apology you receive. It's not always a call for full reconciliation where you need to subject yourself to this person's presence again. And it's not something that just occurs once. It may take consistent attempts to forgive before your heart fully heals. Prolonging forgiveness isn't going to really punish those who hurt you either. Jason compares it to drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die. Forgiveness is the path that leads to an enjoyable life that's not tainted by regrets or resentment. It transforms worry to inner peace, reduces symptoms of depression, anger, and paranoia, and may lower blood pressure, which has been declared by psychiatrist Dr. David Puter and the crew at the Psychiatry and Psychotherapy podcast. It can help you become more emotionally mature overall and improve your ability to love courageously. Asking for forgiveness and forgiving others are two things that neutralize our karma because we're able to drop the ego that's fueled by the negative energy that repels our blessings. How does it feel when someone you love hasn't forgiven you? What if God never forgave us for the mistakes we've made? Keep in mind that everyone has flaws. Furthermore, we should learn to forgive ourselves. We can't go back in the past and change what's already been done. All we can do is implement the changes that will create a better now. Never let someone hold you captive for anything that you have true remorse for. If you apologized and took the steps to correct your actions, it's on them to reciprocate the energy that provides positive reinforcement. Only you will know which battles are worth fighting. Just remember, you can't please everybody all the time. Did this episode hit home for you? Learn anything worth deep consideration? I would greatly appreciate it if you could leave some feedback by emailing me at balanceofalion@gmail.com. Like this post, comment on this post, share this post with your peers. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube, or check out the podcast on Anchor FM or Spotify. Care to make a donation to help us expand? Our Cash App is $Balance of a Lion. Thanks for tuning in.